Mr. Varney, were you still busy?
No, my lord, but we are calling the first witness this morning. My lord, the first witness from the side of the family is Tessa Margaret Eldman. We'd like to call her to the stand.
So help me God. Sorry, Judge, do you mind if I sit while I testify? I believe I'm supposed to stand.
No, not at all.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you want to stand at some point, you're also welcome.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Good. Varney.
As the court pleases. Ms. Eldman, firstly, thank you for taking the time to be with us this week and for all the support that you have provided to the survivors and the family members, not only during the course of this week, but over several years. And this morning we want to hear about that work in as much detail as possible. Before we commence, do you confirm that you made out an affidavit with the attorneys Cliff Decker Hofmeyer on the 27th of January of this year?
Yes, I did.
My Lord, that statement is in Exhibit C at page 102. And before I commence, I see your real name is Tessa Margaret Eldman, but you're known as Teresa by everybody. Why is that?
It's a bit of a funny story because working in the Eastern Cape, people who speak isiXhosa will know that ukuteza means to chop wood. And so if I told people my name was Tessa, they'd look at me like I was very strange. And I'd go, it's like Teresa. And people go, oh, Teresa. And that just became my name. Yeah.
That's a lovely story.
The best thing about Tessa is if you write it backwards, it spells acid.
I see. Can you tell us a bit about your professional life, your education, and your career?
Well, that's a long story. I'll keep it as short as I can. So I worked as a teacher. I then was peripherally involved with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And in the late 1990s, early 2000s, started an organization called the Spirals Trust, which was an attempt to be a grassroots Truth and Reconciliation Commission initiative to continue the work the TRC had begun at a national level. And that was when I first became involved with the Highgate United Group. When the Spirals Trust folded in 2008, I completed a PhD in history and psychology, looking at the psychosocial legacies of conscription into the South African Defence Force. And since then, I have worked in academia and in the NGO sector and done freelance work, a range of things.
Right, that's a very impressive career trajectory that you've had. And thanks for truncating it. I'm pretty sure there's a whole lot more you could be telling us. And in between all of that, you did mention in passing how it was that you came into contact with the survivors and family members of the Highgate Hotel Massacre. Perhaps you can tell us in a bit more detail how it was that you first made contact with them.
Yes, so as Neville Beeling testified, in 2005, he engaged with Dr. Francis Morris and Professor Pumla Gobodo Madikizela. Jinfuri facilitated a mediation between Neville and Letla Pampahlele. When the information came to light in that mediation that APLA had not authorized the Highgate attack and that it was more likely to have been some kind of third force attack, Neville wanted to share that information with the other survivors and family members. But people in Cape Town at UCT, etc., did not have the resources to be able to do that. They contacted Professor David Edwards at Rhodes University, with whom I had done work already, and the Spirals Trust. And he suggested that the Spirals Trust take the lead in terms of working with Neville to trace the other survivors and family members and to share this fairly shocking information with them. Shall I keep going?
Keep going.
Okay.
If we could just pause for one second before you keep going.
Yes.
Can you just explain what it was, what was the Spiral Trust, when was it set up, and why?
Yes. It was registered as a non-profit organization in, if I remember correctly, 2002. It began as a part-time program at the College of Transfiguration, which is an Anglican seminary. Based in Makanda, and it was very much a narrative-based storytelling initiative aimed at bringing together the contrasting and often conflicting stories of the apartheid era together. And so you can imagine an Anglican seminary only recently were women allowed to be ordained at that time, and the church itself had gone through a massive time of shift and transformation in terms of who was being trained to be a priest. And so the enormous success within the first 2 years of that program, and we ended up at the United Nations presenting what we were doing as a model of faith-based peace education. That then led to us registering as a non-profit organization, and we supported initiatives like the 1 in 9 campaign. We did a lot of work around masculinities and violence. A range of different programs. Funding for that work at that time was very difficult. Much later on, during Fees Must Fall, people were saying to me, you were 15, 20 years ahead of your time, we need Spirals now. But yeah, it was really funding struggles, and being based in the Eastern Cape, which makes funding struggles even more difficult, that led to us deciding to fold the trust and hand over our programs to other stronger organizations to continue.
Thank you for that important background, and now you can continue with...
And so it was really with knowing that that was the ethos of our work, and that Neville was asking to share the story of his mediation with the other survivors and family members, that I was asked to contact him. And so I came through and met with him at his home, and heard his story for the first time. And he had recently been through a narrative therapy process with Dr. Francis Morris and found for the first time the language for the things that had happened for him. She had done extraordinary work with him, I must say, because he had spent pretty much 13 years sitting in a dark room with curtains drawn, just completely traumatized by not only the attack, but as the court has heard, the enormous physical trauma he'd been through, and then being shot at, etc., etc. He then helped me to trace different people, the survivors who are here today, family members. Somebody told him that Darrell Else had been the original investigating officer, so that led to me. We were at a planning meeting for the 10th anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha, at the red location, and that was how come I was able to say to Darrell Else, I'll come and find you and meet with you. And so that was how the first connection between Darrell and this process happened. He and Christian Botha were busy with another case at the time. And so over time, we pieced together phone numbers, contact details. We contacted the Highgate to get a sense of what their relationship with this whole process was. And the Centre for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, CSVR, also came on board to support us and to help us with managing the logistics of all of this. The end result was, if I remember correctly, I think September 2006, we held the first ever gathering of the Highgate survivors and family members at the Kenaway Hotel. And just a comment about that process and what I learned during that time was that there'd been no support work with the survivors and family members since the time of the TRC. I think there was an assumption about the fact that the majority of victims were white, you know, that insurance policies would kick in, that there'd be social support networks that would enable them to cope better than people who'd been direct victims of apartheid on the basis of their race, because the majority of TRC cases were people like that, the cases that appeared before the TRC Gross Violations of Human Rights Committee. And yet nothing was further from the truth, was what I found out. There weren't insurance policies. Francine Wheeler, whose husband was killed, was living in a garage with no running water because there'd been no insurance payer to support her, and she'd relied on the kindness of family and of strangers, and so on and so on. I mean, I could spend a long time talking through that, but I think the testimonies of the survivors and family members are more important in that regard. And so it was quite extraordinary that it was 13 years after the attack that the survivors met up with each other for the first time, angry and bitter because they'd been fed the APLA narrative, very aggressive towards Darrell Else because he had failed to solve that case. All the other APLA attacks, not so-called APLA attacks, the actual APLA attacks, people had been arrested. The people who'd carried out the attacks had been identified. The Highgate was the only case where that had not happened. I remember Darrell fidgeting a lot in the meeting and saying he was going to go outside to have a smoke, and I said, I'll come with you. And he admitted afterwards that he was going to do a runner. He was so nervous. I was ready to grab him by the elbow. And of course, Letlap and Pashlele arrived alone, willing to engage with the survivors and family members and to tell them the same story that he had told Neville in the mediation. CSVR was there, Jin Fourie was there, and so we took time to hear from each person for the first time the full story of the Highgate survivors and family members. And then, Louise Flanagan was there as well, because she had done a lot of research into this farm, this so-called Vlakplaas 2, and had provided us with very helpful information. And at that meeting, it was decided that we needed to ask the NPA to reopen the investigation, that we wanted to call for the inquest that had never happened to take place. Now that we've heard the evidence of this week around Darrell Else's role in delaying that same inquest that he was sitting in the meetings helping us ask for, I have to say I find myself very conflicted and confused. But in the midst of the media attention around that time, the NPA contacted me. I was often just the name and the person associated with this and speaking on behalf of people, and they asked us to submit a memorandum. And so on record, there is the original fax that was sent to Mthunzi Maga, signed by the survivors and family members, with some quite specific requests. I don't know if it would be appropriate for me to read them, or for maybe...
Yes, I think this would be an appropriate time to take the court through those requests, and I'll just help you with the... I believe it's at page 119 of the paginated bundle. No, that's the summary of the meeting. Yeah, I think it's in fact the last annex attached to your affidavit, which is marked G. at page 172.
Third last.
There's a
yes.
letter and then there's a short fax or memo attached to it.
So I think the wording is quite significant in terms of what transpired afterwards.
Read the page, Mr. Barnes.
My lord, it's the in fact the last page of the bundle, 173. It's Annex G to Teresa's affidavit.
Is a fax to
Correct.
Twenty Mark.
Correct. Yes. Judge. Yes.
173.
So, if I may, I'd like to read the covering letter as well as the
Please do.
request. So it's dated the 11th of December 2006, sent from the Spirals Trust office in Grahamstown. Dear Mtunzi, 1993 Highgate attack investigation. Please find attached a copy of the memorandum drafted by the Highgate survivors who attended a meeting on Saturday the 9th of December 2006. And just for clarity, this meeting was in East London, not Grahamstown. The following survivors who were not present have also given their verbal support to the memorandum today over the telephone. Ian Hacking, son of Stan Hacking, who died in the attack. Neville Harris, father of Dion Harris, who died in the attack. Doreen Rousseau, who was injured. Keith Bayling, brother of Billy Bayling, who was also present at the Highgate that night. And Billy Bayling, who was injured in the attack. We have not been able to trace the family of Douglas Gates, who was killed, or Nkosinati Alfred Gonchi, who was injured in the attack. Any assistance you might be able to give us on this matter would be greatly appreciated. There are a number of people who are willing to offer information, so I look forward to passing that on to you in due course. Best wishes with this important work, and thanks again for making contact, Teresa Edelman. Then the memorandum, as we've called it, that was signed on the 9th of December. Dear Mtunzi Maga, in response to your telephonic request of the 30th of November 2006, we as the survivors of the 1993 Highgate attack hereby request a renewed investigation into the attack to clarify the motivation, organization, and identity of the perpetrators. We furthermore request transparency through regular updates on the progress of the investigation on at least a quarterly basis. We offer our full support in your endeavours to investigate, but request that we are always approached as a group and not as individuals. The Spirals Trust will facilitate communication with the group. Given the sensitivity of the case, we trust that this investigation will be dealt with in the strictest confidence. Yours sincerely, Charles Boddington, Carl Weber, Bernice Whitfield, Roland Parker, Fran Wheeler, and Neville Beeling.
So what then transpired after you had submitted that memo to the NPA?
Mtunzi did respond positively, and in February of 2007, he met with the Highgate survivors at the Psychological Support Centre of the University of Fort Hare, because they were another of the civil society partners that came on board. If I forget to say this later in my statement, I think this Highgate case is such a powerful case study of the role that civil society can play in supporting processes of justice like this, because the number of individuals and organizations from academia, NGOs, the legal profession, the church, it's just phenomenal, the number of people that have stepped up at different times. And so the University of Fort Hare played its part as well. He did meet with all of us and assured us that they would be questioning a number of people and that he was determined to solve this case. If I remember correctly, we did invite him to attend the memorial, because the other thing that we had decided was to hold a memorial on the 1st of May 2007 in the Highgate Hotel, and to unveil a plaque in memory of those who had died and to acknowledge everybody else whose lives were affected on that day. He declined to attend. It seemed that he was uncomfortable with the publicity that was already, I mean, there was a carte blanche documentary. So the carte blanche documentary that was mentioned yesterday in the proceedings was in 2007. They came and covered the memorial itself. And he drew Darrell Else in, and exactly what his and the NPA's relationship with Darrell Else wasn't clear, but it did seem that what Darrell told us was that he had been medically boarded from the Scorpions, and that therefore he was working as a private investigator. And he was part of many of these meetings. He almost behaved like he was another Highgate survivor, which in many ways he probably was. But it became increasingly clear that Mthunzi was relying on Darrell to do some of the investigation work for him. We continued having regular meetings at the University of Fort Hare, right through until July 2007, when we handed over to the Highgate United group, and the survivors took the process forward from there. At that stage, by July 2007, into the second half of 2007, it was becoming increasingly clear that the NPA was taking the line that the information we had provided was inconclusive. And so communication dissipated. It seemed that Darrell was continuing to do this investigation work for the NPA. That relationship was not clear. During that time, he became increasingly evasive and difficult to get hold of. And then, as the court has heard, Judge, the whole culmination of that trip to Cape Town, which the survivors paid for, which also then resulted in nothing coming to light. So our specific request for quarterly updates was not respected, and there was a sense that there was initially a lot of energy. There really was a sense that Mthunzi was committed to this, but then something else happened, and it just went off the radar, really. That was the feeling we got.
So after the initial optimism of Mthunzi coming on board, Darrell Else conducting this mission to Cape Town, we've heard from survivors and family members that initial information that Darrell Else was passing on seemed to be very encouraging. But then we also heard that after that mission, he became difficult, if not impossible, to get hold of. Was that a particularly dark period for you and the survivors and family members?
Yeah, it really was. The time of the memorial and the fact that the NPA had contacted us and said, please help us to reopen this investigation, was an incredible high. And with the lows and the lonelinesses of what survivors and family members have been going through for 13 years, then kind of shot up into all of this public attention, carte blanche arriving and covering the memorial. Mark Kaplan at a later stage came and made a documentary, huge media attention, a sense that there was a breakthrough of some kind happening, but also the fact that survivors and family members were quite triggered by all of this because it was bringing to the surface things that many people had not wanted to talk about for a long time. And so there was this sense of, at different levels, the impetus of the group was gradually eroding. Keith Bayling, right from the time of the memorial, said, I don't want to be involved with the memorial. My sole priority is supporting my brother, who is psychologically and physically a wreck, and living in solitude in a beach house. That is my priority. You do what you need to do. This is my focus. Someone like Charles Boddington was keen to be involved initially, and then just became disillusioned and frustrated that all these hopes had been raised, only for things to feel like we weren't being taken seriously. And I think that was one of the hardest things about this time, right through to when Captain Nell became involved. Because then we suddenly got word that Captain Nell was going to be interviewing everybody, because we all stayed in touch through this time. So there was the huge high of 2007. Then the frustration and confusion with little fragments of information coming through, sometimes because, like Lindeen did, you know, she's one of the best detectives I know. She can squirrel out information from anybody, anywhere, and anything. She's actually brilliant at online searches, you know, and different people contacting Neville and Carl and Lindeen at different times with fragments of information that seemed to us to add up. But the constant message we got was, where's the evidence? You're just giving us pieces of information that add up to nothing. You're grasping at straws. You're wasting your time here. Why are you giving the survivors false hope, was what I was often asked. And so, yeah, even, you know, Captain Nell, he said those same words to me. I didn't give him a formal statement, but he came and met with me in Grahamstown. I can't remember the exact date. I was busy with PhD and other things at the time. But that feeling of just being dismissed and not taken seriously was incredibly hard, you know. And I kept saying to the survivors, particularly to Neville, over and over and over again, don't lose hope. Something is going to happen one day. Don't lose hope. All the while thinking inside my mind, am I giving him false hope? You know, am I part of a bigger game here? But my own intuition was that at some point an event like this would happen, and here we are.
Well, certainly that support and that message must have helped, because as we heard from Neville, from Carl, from Lindeen, they've never given up to this day.
Yeah.
Teresa, while you're on a roll here, let's pick up the story from your perspective post 2007. You mentioned your interactions with Captain Ben Nell. You can pick up the story from there.
The period from 2007 until the Foundation for Human Rights made contact is a little bit blurry for me. But there were rumors about Darrell Else not being well, about him drinking very heavily and losing his mind. And then the news came that he had, in 2017, the news came that he had died. Another moment was must have been in 2012, if I remember correctly. I was actually on the Tsitsikamma hike and picked up a message on my phone that the raid that Christian Botha had organized on the basis of the information from Dirk Petzer, that raid was going to go down. And I just thought, this is so important. I have to come. And so the people who run the Tsitsikamma hike drove me back to my vehicle, and I drove from Tsitsikamma, stayed with my sister in Jeffreys Bay so that I could be here early the next morning to sit with Neville and Louise while we waited with some hope, you know, finally hope that something could come of this. And then we get word, and you know, we're getting a message saying the raid is going down now. And then there's nothing again.
Now that must have been crushing news for you and Neville and the rest of them.
And so it went, you know, different threads of the story that others have told more eloquently than I have. If I may just focus on the journey with Neville. The journey with Neville around his health issues has been harrowing. Even as recently as over New Year this year, he phoned me. I had guests visiting, and he phoned me saying, "Teresa, I'm in so much pain, I think I'm dying." And he went to casualty because they've removed so much of his digestive tract that if there's even the smallest obstruction, he will die. And the final section of his digestive tract that was removed was must have been 2019, 2020, I think. So by that stage, I had moved to Gordons Bay, and he had made contact with a specialist called Dr. Patel, who was willing to replace the colostomy on his stomach, because the original one that was fitted at the time of the attack by Dr. Comfort, who had trained Dr. Patel. So there are all these personal threads and histories with this thing. So Neville needed to travel to Cape Town to be examined by the surgeon and then potentially go for surgery. Well, what resources does he have to go to Cape Town with? Where does he stay while he's waiting between the examination and the possible surgery? And so he travelled down with his Uncle Louis, and I arranged accommodation in a friend's flat, because ironically enough she was doing the Tsitsikamma hike, in Pinelands. And they were able to get to and from Groote Hospital. And as soon as Neville was admitted, it was 2021, I think, because it was post the worst of COVID. Uncle Louis came and stayed with me in Gordons Bay while we waited with bated breath to see if Neville had survived the surgery or not. And he was in critical care for a number of days. Typical Neville style, he pulled through. How he has survived, that he has a level of courage and strength that I have seldom witnessed, I don't think I've ever witnessed, in anyone else in my life. He came through that surgery, but they had to remove more of his digestive tract. He came back to stay with me in May of last year, because he has a massive hernia around that same new colostomy. And they decided at that point that they can do no further surgery. But in the aftermath of that surgery, in I think 2021, he came and stayed with me. I nursed him through becoming strong enough to travel home again.
Thank you for the support you've given to Neville. And also for explaining and I think bringing home to this court the struggle of Neville and the survivors to simply maintain life and soul, and while doing so to keep struggling for truth and justice.
May I respond to that for a second?
Sure.
I think it's really important to emphasize that it's not just me sitting here. You know, I was involved in the struggle against apartheid because I love this country, and I've given my life to working for peace and for truth and for justice and for love to prevail in this country. And so, but it's not just me, it's the countless other people, those who passed on in the struggle days, those who've passed on who don't get to sit here today and tell their story of the Highgate. I'm speaking on behalf of all of them. And I also just want to say what a part of what's held me in this journey with the Highgate case is, if it's my part to hold this small piece in the broader struggle for justice and for truth and for healing in our country, I will do so. And if I have to go find Darrell Elson, there's a pistol lying on the table in the hotel room in Port Elizabeth in whatever year it was, and I'm thinking, will I come out of this alive? Bloody hell, I'm going in to talk to him. Excuse my language, Judge. Just because this has to be done by somebody, and if it's my small part, it's a tiny part. I don't want my role to be inflated, because it's a tiny part of a much bigger story. So thank you, Bat.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're of the respectful view that it was more than just a tiny part. If you have nothing to add, then I'd like to take you to a few things in your statement.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So as with the testimony we've heard from survivors and family members, initially the accepted narrative was that this was an operation carried out by the Zanian People's Liberation Army, APLA. And in your statement, my lord, pages 103 to 104, you expressed some disappointment with the role of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Can you just elaborate a little on that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think the Truth and Reconciliation element to this speaks to the much bigger part of the story of key systemic failures that were no individual's responsibility. But that was a horrifying realization once Neville had done the mediation with Letlapa, and we then, enough of us from civil society and who'd been involved with the TRC went back to the TRC report and realized that in the midst of the overwhelm of pulling that report together, this particular case had been incorrectly documented. That the 1994 grenade attack had been conflated with the 1993 attack, and kind of, no further action was needed, is the implication in the TRC report. And if it wasn't for, I don't think it's been placed on record with the court that the reason Francis Morris found Neville was that at the Cape Town, Neville did tell that story, I think. It was a chance meeting between Francis Morris and his cousin at the Cape Town airport. And Francis followed up and traced Neville. If it hadn't been for that chance encounter, this misrepresentation in the TRC report might never have been addressed.
Yes, it was unfortunate because the final report of the TRC stood as an official account of what took place. So one can surely understand the feelings of the families and survivors. My Lord, we have annexed as Annexure A the relevant extracts from the TRC report to Teresa's affidavit.
Yes. On page 117.
Indeed, my Lord. And just moving on, in your affidavit, to page 105, you mentioned that that Neville had shared information with you, and amongst the information were witnesses who reported seeing a Honda Ballard
Yes.
near the Horseshoe Valley. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that evidence?
Yes. That was all part of the information that Neville and Louise Flanagan had managed to gather from reports, just talking to people from the area. And so that was a mystery, was why was there that burnt-out vehicle when, according to Darrell Elsa's account to all of us, there was no report of a stolen vehicle on the police records for that night. So it was just odd. It was another of the odd bits of information, particularly given that there were these rumours about this farm in Horseshoe Valley that was allegedly a Vlakplaas 2.
Lord, we will be calling Louise Flanagan to appear next week.
Thank you, Mr. Farley.
And am I right in saying that Louise Flanagan also brought your attention to a unit of Ascaris that was apparently based in East London? What was the significance of that unit?
So it was in the light of what Letlapa had said to Neville at the mediation, it felt like more than a coincidence that Louise, quite independently of that process, had been doing research around Ascari activities in this area because she'd been based at the Daily Dispatch, and that she had pieced together bits of information. One of the bits of information was a list of the payouts to people linked with Vlakplaas that was paid out on the 30th of April 1993. and on that list is Eugene de Kock, so clearly linked with Vlakplaas in some way. There was also the name of somebody who I think had been understood to be an Askari, who was now involved in the taxi industry. His name was on that list, so she claimed, with a payout of just under 130,000 rand. And the timing of the attack going down on the 1st of May 1993 and this payout being on the 30th of April was another of those pieces of information that just seemed odd. But if you piece them all together, as in fact this inquest is now doing, they amount to plausible theories that potentially the Highgate was frustration at having been given the payout, that Vlakplaas 2 was being closed down. Was that one of the possibilities? Or were they acting under orders? And this was their last operation, but the payout had been made the day before. Impossible to know, but impossible not to wonder about.
So if I hear you correctly, this payout was their last payment, so to speak, and they were being let go.
That's my understanding.
And that happened to be the day before the Highgate massacre.
Why this registered in my mind as significant is that I do remember outrage in the media about Eugene de Kock getting a payout of R1 million. And so, you know, that resonated for me. It began to, it gave credence to the theory. The other thing that was interesting about that list was that the service numbers of the people who were being paid out was in the list that Louise had provided. So this all felt like substantial information.
So somehow Louise Flanagan got a list of Askaris and Vlakplaas members, and she passed that on to you. And that's annexed at page 121 as Annex C to Ms. Alden's affidavit, my lord. It does give a list of individuals together with their personnel numbers, but also the payout amounts. Some fairly substantial amounts, I imagine, for those days. For example, the top amount is more than 150,000 rands. Although certain individuals had much bigger amounts. So, for example, Eugene de Kock at number 73 on page 122. That amount is just over R1 million. And at item 74, J.S. Vermeulen was paid out nearly 103,000 rands. It does seem that this was a payout not just for members of the East London Askari unit, but for Vlakplaas as a whole, perhaps including East London-based Askaris.
That was the theory at the time, yes.
Yes.
What was the idea that this was a sort of a severance payment?
That was the information we were given, yes, yes. It was 1993. Codesa was underway. Yeah, I mean, it just the context of it was, often, I think, why the Highgate got forgotten, Judge, if I may, was that Easter was when Chris Hani was assassinated. That July was the St. James Church massacre. You know, it was that very turbulent time when we were clearly moving towards the 94 elections in some way, but it was all quite messy. And so it made sense, again, that the Vlakplaas people were being let go and that this was a credible list.
And if I can draw your attention to what's sitting at the bottom of page 122, which is the last page of that list. It says January 1796. 1625, Daily Dispatch editorial EL. Can you explain why that's sitting at the bottom of the page?
Because Louise Flanagan was a journalist with the Daily Dispatch, and she'd been doing this research and had obtained this information in that capacity, was my understanding.
Okay, all right, we will canvass that with her next week.
Yeah.
And on page 108 of your statement, paragraphs 24, 25, you outline some of your exchanges with Daryl Els. And he seemed to be saying to you that the Highgate attack did not follow APLA's typical tactics. Perhaps this would be an opportune time to outline why you and the survivors have come to believe that this was not an APLA operation. What brought you to that conclusion?
What was very striking for us at the time was that quite independently, Letlapa and Pashlele, in a mediation with Neville, Daryl Els, as what we understood then was the original investigating officer, had come up with had come to the same conclusions. And those included, I might need to consult my list or I might need some prompting, but those included the fact that the attackers wore balaclavas. APLA attackers never did. They wanted to be identified because the APLA Operation Great Storm was in process at that time. And there was a lot of there was a whole PAC political agenda behind that. The other thing was that the weapons that were used, APLA did not use AK-47s in any of the Operation Great Storm attacks because according to Letlapa and Pashlele, they couldn't get bullets for AKs at that stage. So they would steal rifles and ammunition from the Ciskei government, was what he told us, or the Ciskei army. Then the accuracy of the shooting. We saw in the video that was shown a few days ago the bullet holes along the top of the counter, that there were 2 bullet holes right next to each other. He said APLA soldiers could not shoot that accurately, and his comment at the time, and I alluded to it in the media yesterday, was how do you practice target shooting when your training is taking place in Ndansane or Guguletu? APLA attackers, often the bullets would fly, particularly into the roof, because I believe when you fire a weapon like that, there's quite a strong recoil. Grenades, APLA never used grenades as well. And the fact that...
Sorry, can I just pause it for a moment?
I'd love to see my list.
When you say grenades, do you not mean tear gas?
Yes, I do. Sorry, tear gas grenades. Yeah. They withdrew under tear gas, and that APLA, the attackers at the Highgate, withdrew under tear gas, and that APLA did not do that. They would flee the scene as quickly as possible. The other issue was that APLA would immediately claim responsibility for the attack, and what we were told by Daryl Els, and I think he actually says this in the Carte Blanche documentary as well, was that there was a phone call from Zimbabwe, but it turned out not to be a legitimate APLA claiming responsibility for it, but they did say APLA, and so that fitted with the APLA narrative at the time. The other thing that Daryl Els said was that the AK-47s used in this attack were never traced, the bullet markings were never linked to any other attack or crime. Then there was Letlapa and Pashlele's insistence that he had not authorized the attack. I seem to recall there was talk of there being a box that was like an archive of all the APLA attacks from this time. And that Daryl Els and his unit had been hunting down this box. And when they eventually came across this box, I don't know how or where, there was no record of the Highgate, but there were records of all the other APLA attacks in that box. That was something else that was spoken about at the time. And the other thing was that nobody had applied for amnesty or been convicted of the 1993 Highgate attack, whereas all the other Appler attacks, there had been something on record as to who the attackers were. And it was that both Darrell and Letlapa had come to the same conclusions was very striking for us.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is all reflected in your statement. And Lord, it follows paragraph 54, several sub-paragraphs where the witness has set this out in some detail. And I noticed that in your discussion with Darrell Else, he theorized further what the goal of the attack might have been, namely to incite a violent backlash against right-wing groups. Could you elaborate on that theory?
My strongest recollection, given 20 years, was that the theory was it was to incite violence that would destabilize the CODESA negotiations. That the ultimate aim was that CODESA was not able to continue.
And there certainly was a great deal of violence at that time, and indeed the negotiations were under serious threat and in danger of collapse. It was a very dangerous period in our country's history.
Yes, and there was the timing of the Highgate attack in relation to the Avia rally as well. That inciting the Avia in East London at that time would be ideal if that was your objective. Because there is footage in that Carte Blanche documentary, which I think was filmed by Neville Beeling Sr., where Eugene ter Blanche is standing at a rally saying, "Vanaand sit ons Suid-Afrika aan die brand. Tonight we're going to burn down South Africa." And there also were accounts at the time that Constant Viljoen, he certainly came to visit Neville. Constant Viljoen came to visit the survivors in the hospital. Why was he in town? Was he linked with the Avia rally? You know, there was all of those strange things about the 1st of May 1993 and the day, that weekend. Yeah.
Then in your statement, Lord, it's page 113 from paragraph 40. You have a heading titled Ongoing Challenges and Personal Reflections. And you mentioned that in your roughly 20 years that you've worked with the Highgate Massacre survivors, you and the survivors have faced significant obstacles. Can you take us through them?
I think I alluded to some of the most impactful ones. The constant attempts to make contact with the NPA. I mean, at the time that Neville was trying to engage with Advocate McAdam, for instance, in, I think, roughly 2010, between 2010 and 2012 or 13, round about there, I phoned Advocate McAdam as well. It's the only time I've ever spoken to him. And he really didn't want to talk to me, and implied that it was, I had a bit of a cheek. It was a bit of an imposition that I would think I could contact him directly about this matter. And I think that's been, so there's been just the sheer physical hardship and the challenges for individual survivors. You know, Doreen Rousseau died in terrible pain from the injuries. Her knees were injured, but it was the levels of pain that she experienced for the rest of her life. Alfred Gonchi lost his job at the Highgate Hotel and really struggled. I used to drive from Grahamstown via King Williamstown and met him, and once there was a little child that he brought with him because there was nobody at home to take care of the child. And we used to go to the Fort Hare Psychological Services Centre, and then I would drop him off on the side of the freeway again. And when he did pass away, Neville and Lindeen went to that funeral. In my Highgate file, I've got his funeral sheet. And the sense that, and it took, we struggled to find him. Eventually, Darrell Elson, Christian Botha, and Frans, I forget his surname, I never did know it, I heard it for the first time here. But they went and found Alfred the night before the memorial, and he just arrived, wide-eyed, and like, why have these guys come knocking on my door? And he was present at the memorial. So I'm digressing a little bit, but
no, that's fine. This is important.
Yeah. I think the hardship, the physical and personal hardship for family members and for the survivors. I mean, I think about what Neville's parents went through over the years. Neville's father had several strokes. When I met him, he could not speak. They would ask him to stay in his room when I came to visit, because he was so angry, and he would be speaking sounds, but he couldn't speak words anymore because of the stroke. And then he died soon after Zilla, who had worked all day and then gone to nurse Neville through the night at Freya Hospital, and then nursed Neville through all of his subsequent surgeries. I mean, I looked after him once after one surgery, and I know how hard that was. Zilla took care of him until she died in, I think, 2017 or 2018 of cancer. My sense is caused by the stress and the trauma of this. I think of Thora Christopher, who was Carl's partner. She was his caregiver when his arms were absolutely useless. He could not do anything for himself. She nursed him. She cared for him. She died of cancer. Her son came to have dinner with us one night when we had a meeting in Johannesburg last year with the Foundation for Human Rights. And you can see the toll this has taken on the son of one of the carers who became Carl's partner and came to all of the survivors' meetings. Lindeen's father and her mother, who died broken-hearted and struggled with health issues. Those are just three stories I could, four with Alfred. I could go on. So there's that. There's also, for instance, the story of the man they call Pada Wilson, who lived across the road and was one of the first responders, and wrote a song. When your time comes, it's forever, is the opening line of the song. It was like so arbitrary that night that lives were cut short. I remember going to stock car racing at the time that I think Mark Kaplan was making a video documentary. And what was so striking for me was the way in which lots of people from the East London community were saying, yes, I was there that night, or I remember hearing about it, or oh, this has really impacted the whole community. So yeah, there's that part of the story. But then there's also these regular iterations of engagements with the National Prosecuting Authority, and then the investigators appointed, initially Captain Nell and now Captain Peterson, where at a personal level, I had a sense they were just completely overwhelmed. And this was another case they had to deal with, and it's so complex, and then the docket is a mess. How do we do this? But also at the level of due process being followed, due process not happening.
This, of course, is a very important moment for the families, the survivors, but you as well.
Yes.
But it has taken 32 years to get here. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, it's one of so many examples, but it's such a powerful example because of the magnitude of the crime that was committed on the 1st of May 1993, that all that our democracy should be has not shown the best of itself in this case. People whose lives were taken and people who suffered immeasurable damage and harm have had to suffer in this way without the perpetrators ever being brought to account. It is a travesty of justice. And yet this has happened. The inquest we began to think would never happen has taken place. And I really want to take this moment to pay tribute to everybody involved, people in the NPA, the investigating officers, the judge that is sitting here today, Foundation for Human Rights, Cliff Decker-Hofmeyr, our legal team that is here this week. If it had to happen so late, I'm just so grateful that there has been the level of dignity, the level of cooperation between the NPA and our legal team, that there has been. There's been the level of recognition of the survivors and family members that there has, because the level of dignity with which this proceeding has happened is very gratifying. It is very gratifying. It has been almost worth the wait.
Thank you. I think we're indebted to His Lordship for the dignified manner of these proceedings.
I echo that completely.
You mentioned that the family put together a memorial,
Yes.
a plaque that
Yes.
was attached to the wall of the Highgate Hotel. Neville mentioned that because of the renovations, that plaque has been removed, and it's in his possession. Perhaps it can be arranged that that plaque be brought to the court to show the court the plaque before the end of the inquest. Oh, sorry, I believe it's in Lindine's possession.
Lindine has it. It's at the back of a container somewhere, I believe, because I did actually wonder about that. But perhaps I can, quite apart from that request, if I may, Judge, just say that it is our intention to hand all of these records. I still have 2 boxes of paperwork from way back then, and the plaque, newspaper cuttings, the memorabilia that we have. We'd like to hand them to the Amatola Museum. We've been in discussion with them, or Neville has, on our behalf. And that's ultimately the intention, is to create an archive of what happened here for future generations. Our other ongoing effort, if I may, is to set up some kind of fund to provide for Neville and Carl's medical and personal needs as they grow older,
Right.
and need further support.
I think that's an important initiative. And of course, the archival initiative is equally important. Not only the importance of preserving that documentation, the photographs, but also it could stand as a memorial to what happened on the 1st of May 93.
Yes.
Therese, before we close up, is there anything further that you would like to add?
Nothing that comes to mind. Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Well, then,
I'm simply going to conclude by again thanking you for your fortitude and the courage
and your
unrelenting support that you've given to the families of the survivors over many, many years. And that legal team, we're grateful to the further person who.
Thank you, Mr. Varney.
I think not. That's
My Lord, it is our intention now to call a witness who has been requisitioned. However, he has requested that his face not appear on video or in photographs.
Very well. Could the media just respect that request? In respect of the next witness?
Thank you, my Lord. They will be bringing them in now.
Very well.
Abapheleleyo kunye nemfana
Dumisani Ncamazana.
Dumisani Ncamazana.
Do you have any objection to taking her out?
Ingaba ke unayo ingxaki nokuthatha isifungo?
Hayi.
No.
Do you consider the oath binding on your conscience?
Ingabe isifungo esi siyasibophelela isazela sakho?
Hayi.
Hayi. No.
Do you swear that the evidence will be in front of the court will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
ingaba ubungqina uzabukhupha namhlanje kule nkundla izawuba inyani yodwa
Kunjalo.
intini?
Morning, Mr.
Morning, my lord.
Morning, sir.
Morning, Alba.
Yes, they've told me they got you last minute.
Yes, last minute, my lord.
But we still appreciate it.
Thanks for that.
To hear it, assist us. I just want to make sure that Ms. Hannah responded properly to.
Kukho in question of whether the oath is binding his conscience. Yes.
Please just clarify that.
Into enqamazana kukho umbuzo obubuziwe othi ingaba esi sifungo sibophelela isazela sakho na? Impendulo yakho ithe hayi. Ngoku ke ndiyacela ukuba mandiyicacise kuyo ithetha ukuthini. Njengokuba ungumntu ozawuthatha isifungo nabani na unaso isazela andithi ingaba ke ngoku esi sifungo usithathayo siyasibophelela isazela sakho ekubeni into yokuba yonke into ozayithetha izawuba yinyani na? Into ethi ke isazela sakho masikuthundeze into yokuba ungathethi ubuxoki. Ingaba kunjalo into yokuba esi sazela sakho siza kuthundeza uba ungathethi ubuxoki?
Ukhona ndicacelayo into.
Now I'm getting it, Your Worship. I did not get it before.
I thought so, yes. All right.
Do you swear that the evidence will give in front of the court will be the truth, our truth, and nothing but the truth?
Iyafunga ke nobungqina ozawuthi ubukhuphe kuzawuba inyani yodwa, inyani epheleleyo.
Kunjalo ma.
Indeed.
Please raise your right hand and say so help me God.
Phaya msandla sasekunene uthi ndincede thina. Sworn in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my lord. My colleagues have the benefit of having a brief consultation with the witness in this matter and explains that he is in fact a witness of the court. And we would therefore request that if the court could advise him of his rights. Thank you.
Okanqamazana gqwetha eli lithi ke njengoba belinikwa ithuba into yokuba bakubuza imibuzo siphakamiso ezivela kuye sithi kuba wena ulingqina lenkundla ungelo ngqina la bebenocela into yokuba inkundla ibe yiyo lena ke ngoku izawuthi ke ikubuze imibuzo ngokufuna inkcazelo. Siyabona.
Mzani, I am conducting what is known as an inquest, an investigation.
Ngoku ke into kaNqamazana owami umsebenzi ndiyaphanda ngesizekabani sento esisehlo into othi ka sibiza ngesilungu sithi inquest sizekabani
Into an incident that happened on a Saturday evening on the 1st of May 1993.
sehlo eso ke sathi senzeka ngeumgqibelo emalangeni langa lelokuqala kuMeyi unyaka 1993
At a place here in East London known as the Highgate Hotel.
ndawo ke lapha ke Monti eyaziwa ngokuba kuse Highgate Hotel.
There was a shooting incidents at this venue. At that time, that left a number of people dead and a number of other people seriously injured.
Kukho ke izehlo nto kaNqamazana ezathi ke zenzeka kuloo ndawo apho ke ashiya amaxhoba abanye belimele ngokumasikizi abanye baphulukana nemiphefumlo yabo.
The law requires that under certain circumstances, such incidents must be investigated judicially.
Umthetho uthi ke izehlo ezikumila kunjeya kunyanzelekile ke ngokwecandelo ke la lemithetho elawulo mantyi nejaji iphandwe loo nto.
And I am required to do whatever is necessary in order to obtain all the information that could be of assistance with regard to making certain findings about incidents such as that.
Kumele ke ndiyamelezeka into yokuba ndiphande ngako konke okunothi ke ube luncedo. Ncedo olo ke lithi lusincedise xa sizothatha isigqibo esifanelekileyo nesisiso.
So that is what I'm doing at the moment. I've heard the evidence of a number of witnesses.
Yiloo nto ke ndiyenzayo ke ndivile ke ubungqina bamangqina athile.
And from that evidence, it appears that you could be of assistance to the court. That is why I have arranged for you to be requisitioned here.
Kuye kwavela ke into kaNcamazana into yokuba wena kubungqina uthetha xa ungangomnye wabantu banothi ke babe luncedo kolu phando ke esilenzayo.
You have various rights. Amongst other things, if you feel that that you require it, to obtain legal advice and legal representation.
Unawo ke amalungelo ke alixesha into kaNcamazana. La malungelo nawo ukuba ngaba uziva ngongathi uza kudinga into yokuba umelwe ligqwetha okanye ucetyiswe ligqwetha ungakwenza oko.
In particular, if there is some prospect that what might arise in the proceedings could implicate you in some or other respect.
Ingakumbi into kaNcamazana xa kunokwenzeka kuthi kanti phaya phambila kungakho nto zithile ezinothi ke zikurhintyele okanye zikungcolise igama.
So it's necessary for me to ascertain from you what your attitude is with regard to having or obtaining legal advice and having legal assistance in these proceedings.
Yiloo nto ke mna ndibona uba kunyanzelekile into kaNcamazana into yokuba igqwetha okanye umntu ke onento zomthetho abe khona onothi ke akuncedise ingakumbi kulena inkqubo.
So I won't deal with your evidence until that issue has been clarified.
Asuzudatela nzulwini ke deske de lomba sibe ke ngoku ke socacisile siwugqibile.
So I'm going to invite you, I'll give you an opportunity to indicate to me what your attitude is, whether you require advice, whether you require assistance or not, whether you're able to proceed on your own to deal with the proceedings.
Ngoku ke into kaNcamazana elakho ke ngoku elithuba apho ke ngoku nothi ke wena ke usinike into enothi incedisane nawe uyalifuna igqwetha lokucebisa okanye igqwetha enothi ke ibe lelapho kulena inkqubo.
I think let's deal with that one first. You give me an indication.
Masiqale kule ndawo ingabe igqwetha uzalidinga.
Nanjengoba ecebisile ijaji esithi liyadingeka. ekungenzeka mhlawumbi kubekho izinto ekufuneka ndicebise kuzo njengoba ndizayidinga.
I think, my lord, I will. More especially as the court has alluded that there might be some issues that might implicate me. It will be fit and proper for me to have one next to me.
So you would prefer to have advice and assistance?
Ukuke nto kaNcamazana uthi uyawucela ingcebiso uphinde ucele negqwetha nothi lihlale icala kwakho.
Njani?
Indeed so, my lord.
No, that is your right.
Lelakho elolungelo.
Entitled to that. And I won't proceed with the matter as far as your evidence is concerned until that has been attended. Now, you must just indicate to me you clearly are serving a sentence. Are you in a position to afford legal representation, or do you require that legal representation should be obtained for you?
Kucacile ke nto kaNcamazana ngokuba okwalona umzuzu useseluvalelweni. Umbuzo uzawuthi ke ingaba uzawuza nelakho igqwetha okanye uzawucela into yokuba uncediswe igqwetha elingahlawulelwayo.
Ndizawucela uncediswe.
May this court, my lord, assist in that regard.
Very well, I shall do that.
Iyakwenzeka ngosicelo sakho.
So I'm not going to proceed with anything. I'm now going to speak to the representatives of the National Prosecuting Authority in this connection, all right?
Akho nto sawuphinda siqhubeke ngayo deske de ndincokole ke nabecandelo ke labetshutshu.
Ms. Bosman?
Yes, my lord.
Under these circumstances, obviously not persuaded to proceed with Mr. Kamazana until we have resolved this question of legal representation.
Yes, my lord.
Can I request your office to be of assistance in this regard?
Yes, my lord. We will be in contact with the legal aid officers in East London area and facilitate a legal representative to at least consult with Mr. Kamazana.
Yes. So it appears that it is apposite to then to stop the proceedings with respect to Mr. Kamazana and release him at this juncture for this to be done, and hopefully then some report back to the court at the beginning of the new week.
Yes, my lord.
Yes. We still have the session next week, and let us endeavor to see if we can get Mr. Kamazana duly assisted back in the course of next week.
Yes, my lord. We will keep you updated. My lord, once the witness has been excused, we would ask your indulgence to show you the video of the carte blanche expose. It has been referred to by several witnesses, and my learned colleagues have kindly provided us with a copy of that expose.
Yes.
Okancamazana. Sicelo ke ngosenkundla sibhekisa kumama uBosman into yokuba ingabe uncedo lwakho ungalifumana na isithembiso sikhulu leni ingingqi yaseMondo akho namagqwetha angahlawulelwayo anothi ke angenelele ngokuncedisa. Inkundla ke ithandile loo nto intoba kuleni iveki ezayo ingabe ungancedwana siphinde saphuma isithembiso. Kukho nento ithi ke kukho into eyi-footage umboniso bhanyabhanya abacela into yokuba xa sele ke ngoku sithe sanquma kuncokolwe ngaso ngoba ingathi isuka kwinto kwinkqubo okuthiwa yi-carte blanche. Uba ngaba liqulathe ntoni mna nawe sikayazi izawuba yiyabo.
All right, Mr. Kamazana, I'm going to excuse you for the legal representation to be resolved. I will be in touch with the lawyers and will tell me what has happened. I would very much like to see you back next week, but we will arrange the logistics around that. So for the moment, I'm going to excuse you. Thank you for
Ngiyancamaza okwangoku ngabukhululeka. Enye nenye ke bazoyilungisa bebodwa kodwa ke uyawuxelelwa nawe yonke into izawuthi ilungiswe. Okwangoku ungakhululeka. Sorry, Mr. Ncamaza, next Tuesday. What about the interpreter?
Yes, no, I think the interpreter is ready for the weekend.
Thank you, my lord. I appreciate it.
Thank you as well.
Before he turned the rifle onto us, next door, 20 people quickly realized this was no joke. Carl Weber saw it in slow motion.
He wasn't in a hurry, so he was sort of just spraying the ball from one side to the other. I just saw him reload the AK-47 again and started shooting.
It was a few seconds and a lifetime. Some escaped, 5 lay dead. Then they threw a tear gas grenade.
By the time I hit the floor, I couldn't feel my left arm, and I knew I had been hit. And then I felt another 2 shots will hit my back. I just lay still. I made as well as dead.
5 days later, then Detective Sergeant Darrell Else walked into the crime scene that would haunt his dreams for the next
Sorry to
14 years.
interrupt. Can we pause the video for a moment?
Yes.
My attorney just advises me that our clients would prefer not to watch this video. Could they be excused while the video is underway?
Yes, very well.
Thank you for the indulgence.
I think your clients, have left thank you.
You've just been assigned to the case. What were your first impressions?
From what I had seen at the docket, I could see that it had been a bloodbath. The injuries to the deceased were horrible. And having visited the victims and the survivors in hospital, I saw that they'd been shot to pieces.
Darrell Else had been seconded from a local police detective unit to a special task team appointed to investigate the Azanian People's Liberation Army in the early 1990s. He wasn't new to scenes like these. At the time, you believed it was Apla.
Well, at that time, Apla had already then claimed responsibility. They claimed out of Harare through a spokesperson.
It's a matter of pride for Else and his team that they solved every case where Apla was involved. It was the time of the Kempton Park negotiations. On all sides of the political fence were efforts to derail progress. In the build-up to the historic elections of 1994, the Eastern Cape was a hotbed of violent political activity. In Umtata, an SADF raid killed 5 school children. In Johannesburg, a month before Highgate, Chrizani was assassinated by right-wing elements, and Apla declared it their year of great storms. Apla claimed responsibility for 7 high-profile attacks, including the Queenstown Spur, Fort Burford's Yellowwood Hotel, and King Williamstown's Golf Club. It came as no surprise when they also claimed responsibility for Highgate. But now, 14 years later, new information has come to light that may paint a completely different picture about the events of May the 1st, 1993. The Highgate investigation had ground to a halt by 1996. Only Darrell Else hung onto the docket, even after he was promoted to the Taxi Violence Task Team and Scorpions, and despite anonymous threats to stop. All the prison sentences that Else secured in prosecuting applicators add up to 300 years, but Highgate eluded him. He still suspects a cover-up.
It's the only case that I never solved regarding these attacks. The leads all ran to a dead end.
Else tried to get the TRC to investigate the case again. APLA members were applying for amnesty for every attack of the early 1990s. Every attack except the Highgate massacre. Back then, the killers could still get amnesty had they come forward.
It would be deep down inside, hurt to know that the guys would be a free man on the street if he applied for amnesty.
The survivors' lives were shattered. Like all victims of gross human rights violations, they got 30,000 rands compensation, but no investigation, no truth, and no reconciliation.
You feel better. I was anti-black people.
By 2005, Neville Belling couldn't take it anymore. With a fractured hip, massive internal damage, and a permanent colostomy bag, he was always in physical pain. But he was determined not to remain in mental pain. He decided to meet the man he still held responsible.
I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to know who these people were. I wanted to confront them and be able to talk to them face to face.
Back in '93, Apla was commanded by this man, Letlapa Mphahlele. This is the man Neville wanted to meet. White South Africa really encountered him for the first time when, unlike almost every other politician, he refused to atone for Apla's war at the TRC.
I ordered the killings of white civilians. I thought that would storm them out of their cocoons of indifference to the country's reality. My proudest moment was when I saw the whites being killed on the battlefield.
In 2002, still unrepentant, Mphahlele was confronted by the mother of young Lindy Fourie, killed on his orders at Cape Town's Heidelberg Tavern.
Cape Town, in which 4 people died and 5 were injured, has been widely condemned both here and abroad.
Mphahlele told Jen Fourie that it's all about context. He couldn't apologize for the suffering of his people, that it motivated him to make war on white South Africa. Somehow she understood him and somehow forgave him.
I saw the remorse in his eyes, in his body language. And you can't describe that. And he describes it as a restoration of his humanity.
Knowing the value of forgiveness, Mphahlele wouldn't mind taking responsibility for Apla attacks. He agreed to meet Neville. Knowing how such confrontation feels, Jen Fourie mediated. Neville was not prepared for what came out.
Some operations did take place without my full knowledge, but afterwards, definitely I would know. All Apla reports were documented. There was not a single report that referred to the Highgate hotel attack.
Why would Apla claim responsibility?
Apla officially did not claim, but of course, someone apparently phoned to the media.
Mphahlele's explanations shook Neville's world, so he brought all the survivors together in East London to hear the new take on old events. Daryl Else broke his code of secrecy and came along. After 5 heart attacks, he's now being medically boarded from the Scorpions. For the first time, everyone spoke freely of what they knew and suspected.
I clearly remember the guy standing at the door with a belt on, the sort of a navy blue uniform, blue combat boots, gloves. We had long abandoned AK-47. We never concealed our faces, and we never used tear gas. As a matter of fact, most of our fighters had crash course, which means they were not perfect in target shooting, but here the shooters were very accurate. I was shocked. I mean, if one sits and thinks about it, and you look at all the other attacks, you know, the Highgate was a separate attack. It was done completely different. Shocking. It's like, okay, if it's not you, now who is this? During the investigation, certain members made statements stating that even though the attackers had black ski masks on, with only the eyes visible, they could see that it was a white male that had painted black like me around his eyes or camouflage paint. So I still believe that there are whites involved.
If what Daryl Else and Letlapa Mphahlele say is correct, the perpetrators of Highgate are still somewhere out there roaming free and may never face justice. But who could they possibly have been, and more importantly, what was their motive?
It's my challenge to those spineless people who attacked Highgate. They should have stood up at that time and said, we're not taking these instructions. It's now time for them to come forward.
It was too easy to score political points off the massacre, and AK-47 at the time spelled one thing: terrorists. So not only did it seem like an act of victory in the liberation struggle, but a month later the AWB staged a meeting in front of the Highgate to stir up emotions against a peaceful transition to democracy. Dr. Voli Volnerans is one of a handful of private ballistic specialists in the country. He believes with some solid police work there are still enough clues to solve Highgate.
As iemand wat doodgemaak is, iemand het sy lewe verloor, hoekom, kom ons vergeet dit as 'n politieke insident, maar kom ons kyk nou dit as 'n misdaad wat gepleeg is.
Which is exactly what the National Prosecuting Authority has decided to do. The case has officially been reopened as a priority crime. Spokesman Panyaza Lesufi says justice also serves a higher cause.
Some people say, why not let sleeping dogs lie? I mean, why bring up all this stuff from the past?
We can't. We'll find answers where there are no answers. That's what guides us. That's the only way for us to safeguard and defend our democracy. It's a hard road, but it's a road that we've chosen.
For the survivors, going forward also means going back in time together to say goodbye properly to the friends who died next to them. Transformation facilitator Teresa Edelman helped them put together the first memorial service for the dead and to work through pain that's never quite subsided.
The ideal scenario for me is that somebody who was directly involved is able to meet with the survivors, for them to have a moment to engage with the people who did this and to understand something of what happened for them that day and be able to make peace. My belief is that that will bring a closer version of healing than sitting in a courtroom for months after months.
Those who took part in the attack have a solemn responsibility to come forward saying, we did it. This will be an act of unparalleled heroism.
Well, it might seem crazy looking for evidence so many years later, but if you have some information, contact the Priority Crimes Unit on 012 Pretoria Code 845-6473. I'll repeat that, 012-845-6473. Well, that is carte blanche for this Sunday. Have a great week and cheers for now.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Bosman. Are we handing something in with regard to this? The footage?
My Lord, would like to, if we could please give us the opportunity to put together a flash slip and then hand it up within the next week.
Very well. Good, so we'll attend to that at that point.
My Lord, if I may just tender an apology at this stage. The investigating officer also informed me we were not advised that the special team would be here and that large rifles could be present and individuals wearing balaclavas. I can imagine that it stirred some emotion in the survivors, and I must tender an apology for that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, every time that Mr. Ramazana is going to be called, he is going to be accompanied by security as a result of his status.
Very well. Yes. I assume. Yes, Mr. Mani.
Lord, just a few housekeeping matters from our side before we wrap up today. Lord, there is actually a second film made on the Highgate by the filmmaker Mark Kaplan. Over the weekend we will view it and consider whether it should also be viewed by the court. And if we do, we'll also supply on a flash drive as an exhibit. My Lord, yesterday there was an exchange over the question of whether a bullet was removed from the arm of survivor Carl Weber. We have now discovered documentation that confirms that indeed a bullet was removed and was subject to examination. But it does appear that that documentation is not presently before your lordship. It's part of a docket that was provided to the families in scanned format in September last year. But it does seem as if some of that documentation is not part of the bundle of papers that was provided to your lordship prior to the beginning of this inquest. We have conferred with our learned friends from the NPA, and they have undertaken to provide that full docket in paginated and index form to your lordship on Monday morning. We hope also to get a copy of that document. Well, we have it, but we don't have it in indexed or paginated form. We think that would assist this inquiry, particularly since on Monday one of the witnesses, we understand, will be Mr. van der Merwe, the ballistics expert.
Yes, I think that concludes the proceedings for today. I'm going to then adjourn the proceedings until Monday. Not sure what the date is. 3rd of February. So we're into February already. All right. 3rd of February 2025 at 10 o'clock. Court will adjourn.